Okay, take it away, Sluggo.
All right, we are live and rock and roll. Hello, everybody. This is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman, back for the 99th, the number 99, Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom, otherwise known as the GREE or the GREE-GREE. We're starting with 46 people. It's great to have everybody with us. We have a wide range of stuff today. I want to mention that is the first or second, we're not exactly clear, celebration, national celebration of the Juneteenth holiday. We're going to start off with Claire Atkin, talk about defunding some of the rightist commentators. I do want to mention we're going to talk about some election victories and one or two defeats, but some big election victories around the world. We're going to discuss the January 6th Commission and the possibility of, we hope, of the indictment of Donald Trump, and not only nationally, but also potentially in Georgia. The second hour, and that's going to be a roundtable. We're going to want everybody to be commenting on that. The second hour, we're going to have a really deep dive on the Pacifica radio network, which is really on the brink of many, and is certainly a major situation in terms of election suppression and the suppression of democracy. So we've got a really amazing gathering as always. Again, it's our 99th. We will gather again next week, 5 p.m. Eastern time, 2 p.m. Pacific for number 100. But on Juneteenth, very quickly, I'll tell you the history of Juneteenth, and then we'll go straight to Claire Atkin. Juneteenth is from June 19th, 1865. As you all know, on January 1st, 1863, Abraham Lincoln declared that slavery was abolished in the Confederacy, and he exempted the 4 border states that had slavery, plus 13 counties or parishes in Louisiana, very political. But on April 9th, 1865, the Confederacy thankfully surrendered, but the word didn't get to Texas until June 19th. And on that day, a Union soldier officially announced that the Confederacy had been defeated and slavery was now universally abolished in the United States. And that's why we celebrate Juneteenth. So Mazel Tov, congratulations, everybody. It's a great day to celebrate. And I'm glad we're having our call to underline the realities of all this, even though I guess what it qualifies, thank you, Tucker Carlson, as critical race theory. If that's critical race theory, I'm all for it. And I'll teach my kids in whatever classes I teach. We're joined now by Claire Atkins. Claire, if you will show yourself, please. I hope you will clarify. Where are you, Claire?
Hi there.
Yes, I hope you'll. Where are you? Let me see here. Are you on video? Can we see you?
I am. Hi, Sluggo. It's good to be
there
here.
you are. Hi, Claire. Okay, I'll hope you'll clarify for everybody that you are not Jen Psaki, but you are. You are in British Columbia, in Vancouver, right? And you have been running an amazing campaign aimed at defunding the right wing. Can you talk to us about this? Tell us your organization and tell us how people can get in touch with you and how to support you. We now have 60 people on the call, and let's hear it.
Thanks, Sluggo. And thanks for having me, everyone. It's wonderful to be here today. I am Claire Atkin, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Check My Ads Institute. Check My Ads is the first ad tech watchdog for a multi-billion-dollar advertising industry that really upholds our entire industry. What I'm talking about here is the display ads that you see on websites around the world. So if you go to any website and the display ads show up, it's part of a $400 to $700 billion digital advertising industry. And $2.6 billion of that is what's called the disinformation economy. That is all of the money that is going to prop up disinformation that we see. Now, I want to be very clear, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit in America, and we are only talking about disinformation and hate, and particularly with this campaign, election disinformation. This is not a left versus right organization. This is a journalistic standards versus disinformation organization. It just so happens that certain tactics are being deployed that look political on the outside.
Well, how do you operate?
Thanks for asking.
What do you do exactly, and what's the strategy and what's the tactics?
Okay, so what we're doing at Check My Ads is dismantling the disinformation economy. Again, that's a $2.6 billion economy. Now, how the ad system works is that advertisers don't place ads themselves on the internet. They get a type of company called ad exchanges to do that for them. So what they do is they go to the ad exchange and they say, we have, let's say, $50 million for our campaign for the next 3 months. We need you to place these ads all over the internet, but please keep our brand safe. Make sure that we're not sponsoring violence. Make sure that we're not sponsoring the promotion of drugs or alcohol. We have a reputation to uphold. We care about our brand. And ad exchanges on their part have said, don't worry, we only work with premium publishers, that is premium websites. And so they tell clients, their advertising clients, they say, we'll never put your ads anywhere that promotes violence. So what we do at Check My Ads is uncover relationships between the ad exchanges and the websites that do in fact promote violence. And when we did this with Charlie Kirk is a millennial white nationalist. He sent 80 buses to the insurrection full of people who were there, one of whom ended up assaulting a police officer. This man created real world violence, and charliekirk.com was getting ads until we pointed it out. And then they were kicked off what's called the digital supply chain right after our campaign launched on January 5th. So we're defunding the January 6th insurrectionists who made the most money off of the big lie. These are Dan Bongino. We've already lost Dan Bongino, 12 of his ad exchanges, and he was kicked off Google Ads and YouTube. Steve Bannon's Real America's Voice, Glenn Beck's The Blaze, timpool.com, or it's timcast.com, but it's Tim Pool's website, Charlie Kirk. And now we're asking, on June 9th, we launched a new part of the campaign. We're asking, how is Fox News any different? Fox News has created the big lie in so many ways. Why are they still getting ads? Why are they still on the ad exchange when all the others have been kicked off?
Good question. And so how many people are involved with your effort?
Well, since we launched on June 9th, this Fox News effort, we've had tens of thousands of people sign up to send emails to ad exchanges with us. So what this is a pressure campaign. If you go to checkmyads.org/Fox, that's checkmyads.org/Fox, you can sign up to write action emails with us. And what that is we'll send you an email every other day that says, here's the name of the CEO and the legal counsel of this ad exchange. Here's how to contact them. And here's a message template that explains exactly what their policy says for who they work with versus who they're actually working with. And we're asking these ad exchanges, how is Fox News any different? They're promoting violence in our world, especially election disinformation and political violence. Why are they still receiving ad funding?
Very good. William Mastis, does he work with you, Claire? William Mastis?
No.
He has a hand. William Mastis, did you want to ask Claire something?
Hold on.
You're good. You're on.
Oh, I'm on. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. No, I was just instructed to do that, so I did it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Does any?
As of right
we'll be
now,
back
I've
with
got
you.
nothing to say, but I'm listening. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you. Claire, have you posted how to get in touch with you on the in the chat?
I'm doing it right now.
Okay. Does
So
anyone
at
else have-
checkmyads.org/Fox.
What is it again?
It's checkmyads.org/Fox.
Okay.
And that's where you can input your email address. Then you'll get, if you check your inbox after that, maybe your spam folder, if you're unlucky, check your inbox, you'll get an opt-in email. Click that yes to the opt-in, and then you'll get a welcome email from us. And then immediately you'll receive a template and you can email Yahoo ads with us and ask them why they're still working with Fox News.
Beautiful. Sounds great. Tatanka Bricka, did you want to jump in here?
All I wanted to do is say thank you, Claire. I'm going to get involved.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Glenn Rying? Glenn Rying? Yes, Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Quick question. What about groups like OAN and the Trump campaign, which recently on January 6th, they were, the second session, they were mentioning how their campaign was funneling ads for legal defense.
Yeah. So the advertising industry is incredibly powerful for propaganda outlets. When a propaganda outlet like OANN gets connected to what is called this sort of digital supply chain, this digital ad economy, they don't just get money, but they get data, like how to better target people who might be susceptible to their disinformation. And they get ads, of course. And the ads themselves give this incredible legitimacy to what is otherwise disinformation, but looks like news. And I'm happy to report that OANN has already lost their ad exchanges. They don't have programmatic advertising, and thus they don't have these blue chip brands that would give legitimacy in the form of ads. And we think that that's where Fox News should be as well. I mean, Fox News has every right to publish what they want, and advertisers should have every right to stay away from it, which is exactly what they've done already with OANN.
Very good. Ruth Strauss, Dr. Ruth for Claire Atkin. Ruth Strauss, are you with us here?
Yes. I just want to say that's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I love it. It's the Jerry Maguire, follow the money. You're cutting off the spigot. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth.
Okay.
People ask us a lot, well, how is this going to hurt them? I mean, they have their cable news revenues. What is this, foxnews.com? It's just a small part of their organization. Well, it's important to remember that, of course, they get those three things. The ads give legitimacy, the money helps sustain and grow their operations, and the data helps them better target individuals. This is helping us take away an incredible tool for propagandists. The digital supply chain, this digital ad economy, is something that Fox News values deeply. And if we can cut them off at the source of this economy, we think that would make a big difference for their, not only their bottom line, but also their ability to better and better propagandize.
Fantastic. All right, does anyone else have George Ripley? George? Did you have a hand here, George?
Yeah, thank you. What was the movie about the deep data mining that Trump utilized, the Trump campaign?
The Great Hack.
The Great Hack.
And
And
Claire, have you seen The Great Hack?
I have actually, David Carroll is in it and he's on our board.
well,
cool.
that kind of analysis of the data that helped them achieve what they're doing, you're directly attacking that, aren't you? You're looking for the weak links in their data mining and data analysis and data applications.
What we're doing is cutting them off from the source of the tooling that allows them to do exactly that. I mean, the way Cambridge Analytica used Facebook to better target people who are more susceptible to disinformation is the exact same way that these propaganda websites can use to target the audiences of websites. Now, what we're doing is just a snip. We're asking ad exchanges to look at their supply policy. Their supply policies literally say, we do not work with websites that publish election disinformation. And so what we're saying is, then why are you still working with websites that publish election disinformation? And that cuts them off from the data that allows them to do exactly what you described, better and better target people.
Yeah, everybody should see The Great Hack and also The Social Dilemma. Have you seen The Social Dilemma?
Yeah, also very good.
Very, very disturbing. Those two movies, I think, do the best job I've seen of dissecting the information, Orwellian use of internet-based information. I'd be remiss, for those of you who are interested in the economy, I have seen The Big Short 4 times. It's an amazing movie and really explains a lot. And last night I watched another one called The China Hustle, which is about investing in China. I know this sounds a far afield, Claire, but since we're looking at a major economic situation in this country, I recommend that one as well. Does anyone else want to have a word with Claire Atkins before she leaves us? Okay, Claire, you've put all your contact information in the chat, I hope.
Yes, so please go to checkmyads.org/Fox. You know, we launched this on June 9th. It's the same day that the congressional hearings on January 6th started. And what my message is to everyone is we don't have to wait for Congress to hold the insurrectionists accountable. We can do something now. If you write letters with us, you will be making a difference. These ad exchange executives, they don't want to hear from you. They have made money. They have done incredibly well, making money for years in relative obscurity. And what we're doing today is saying, we see you and enough is enough.
Well, thank you very much, Claire. It's been great to have you on. I hope you'll join us again. Keep us posted at least every couple of weeks on your activities. And folks, if you'll sign on with Claire, what's the name of your group again?
Checkmyads.org/Fox.
All right, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Claire. Claire Atkins, thank you very much. We're joined, I'm going to go, is Dr. CAROLYN ORR on with us? Dr. ORR, is she on yet? I don't see Wendy either. So we'll go to LEHMAN WEISCHSELBAUM. LEHMAN, are you with us? Very briefly, asked to unmute here. LEHMAN WEISCHSELBAUM is a journalist who has been covering issues on the left for many, many years.
Great.
Now working, he's in Brooklyn. He's now working on a piece on fraud in the 2016 election. You got 3 minutes, LEHMAN, if you'll tell us what you need from us and what you'd like. We have 71 people on the call. Go for it.
Sure, very simple, very basic. I am an independent, longtime reporter in New York City. The story we're looking at is the theories around possible manipulation of the vote count, hacking into the software of the voting machine network in both the 2016 election and the 2020 election, coming from Trump forces. It stopped the steal, but going in the other direction. And we know there's been talk about this over the years. It's never quite bubbled to the surface in a big dramatic way. There's been some investigation of it. I know Harvey's had a piece of it. There's been most dramatically Jill Stein's efforts after the election, which have sort of halted. What we're essentially looking for, given the perfect crime nature of what we're talking about, where nothing much of fingerprints is left in this, it could be left in this very high-tech heist, is the whistleblower. We're looking for somebody who can tell us something from the inside, whether from within the Trump camp or somewhere in the computer business, who either was directly involved or knows somebody who might have been. So we're looking for our deep throat. If you have any leads for us, please let us know, or any thoughts. Dream revelations, we're willing to listen, but we're looking for the whistleblower. We're looking for somebody who has the ear of Jill Stein. We're figuring since she was the high-profile front woman on this issue back in the day, she might have something to tell us. She apparently is not talking to media types like us. They're telling us that she's very wrapped up in a federal lawsuit around her efforts, but we would just like that 1 minute from her if somebody can get to her and tell us what she got in her stable of potential whistleblowers. Okay. So that's pretty much it. My email address is very simple. It's LEHMAN718@AOL.com. LEHMAN, my name, LEHMAN. Think of the dead broker. 718 Brooklyn area code at AOL.com. I'll try to post it on the message board as well. There's a lot more to say on the subject, but think whistleblower, think Jill Stein, hit me.
Okay, thank you, LEHMAN. Thank you very much. And I hope your whistleblower finally does come forward. Ruth Strauss, did you want to say something about this?
I just wanted to suggest that you contact Marilyn Marks. I think it's Coalition for Good Governance, but anyway, she's in Georgia, and she punked a guy who got on the phone with her and told her that he had been able to hack the hard drive of, a voting machine or some voting machines in Georgia. And she just, played dumb and went along with him and got a whole recorded conversation about the whole thing. So I'm just suggesting you talk to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Steve Caruso, did you want to add in here?
Yeah, I was going to say Dr. Bob worked with Jill Stein. Of course, he's written endlessly on the machines and the hacking of the machines, so forth and so on. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Okay, very good. I see we're joined by CAROLYN ORR. Thank you, LEHMAN, and good luck. We did a lot of writing on 2016. As you'll recall, in 2016, when Trump was running against Hillary Clinton and uttered those prophetic words, which we will get to in a moment, lock her up, talk about karma coming back on someone. And we were pretty clear that the vote was hacked in 5 states in 2016 that put Trump in the White House. Trump clearly lost the national popular vote by 2.8 million. And we believe that he lost in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida. And his vote count was assisted through fraudulent means that we've been investigating since 2000 in Florida and 2004 in Ohio. And Jill Stein, who was the Green Party candidate for president, she is a medical doctor from near Boston, went in with a legal team and looked at the hacking, particularly in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And in Michigan, she filed a lawsuit and demanding a recount and an investigation of the voting in Michigan, and had a judge agree with her and say that the situation warranted a recount, but that under Michigan law, the recount could not be mandated by Jill Stein because given the mathematics of the situation, she couldn't win. And so he basically said if Hillary Clinton asks for a recount in Michigan 2016, he was going to grant it. And Hillary Clinton's attorneys were in the courtroom and they said no. And they never had a recount in Michigan 2016. It's absolutely outrageous. And people have asked me, why didn't Hillary Clinton authorize a recount in Michigan 2016? And I have no idea. If LEHMAN or somebody else finds a whistleblower who has access to her shrink's records, maybe we could get an answer on that. Steve, do you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up Mitch McConnell's run. A woman on Twitter named Grassroots Speak or Grassroots Speak. I can bring up her thing. He was questioning that counties, 2 counties that regularly all the time vote Democratic, all of a sudden switch, and the vote tilt was so outlandish. I mean, she brings up points and she was getting help from other people, but nobody seemed to follow through to get some evidence. And of course, you're going to get stonewalled completely by the Republican sector trying to get information, but that's not here.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Steve. We're going to go now, and thank you for all that. We do wish we had more to say about the 2016 election. And LEHMAN, I wish you well in your research and your search for a whistleblower. I want to mention Dr. CAROLYN ORR. Are you with us, Dr. ORR?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, you are. talking to us from Australia. Is that correct?
I am indeed.
Okay.
Harvey.
Before we go to you, I want to welcome to the call Ray McClendon. Ray, are you with us? All right, we'll come back because there's a couple things I want to talk to Ray McClendon about. CAROLYN ORR, we're going to get into a section now. I want to talk about, CAROLYN is with us before. She is in Australia. And I want to talk about briefly a spate of elections that have occurred that have been very impactful. The first, of course, is Australia itself, which we're going to talk to you about, CAROLYN. The change of government there appears to be quite significant. And as Americans, you know, since you're upside down, we don't quite understand what's going on there. And we hope you'll have time to talk with us about it. I do very briefly, quickly, I see Ray McClendon is with us. Ray, I didn't get, last time you were on, we didn't get to sufficiently congratulate you on becoming political director of the NAACP of the whole state of Georgia. And if there's any state in the country where someone will want to be political director of the NAACP, it's certainly Georgia. So we're honored to have you with us. And I do have some things I want to ask you about Georgia when we get through the elections, okay? Because we want to have the second half hour here. We're going to go very deep into January 6th and what's been happening and the possibilities of indicting Trump. And I do want to reference an article by Steve Rosenfeld that said that Trump could, in fact, be indicted in Georgia, which would be a fabulous turn of events. And I'm sure you can discuss it, but we've got, we'll come to you in a few minutes. We have CAROLYN in Australia.
Thanks. I'll be here.
Good, thank you so much, Ray, good to see you. But before we get into Australia, I want to mention, many of you probably know, there has been a huge turn of events in Colombia, where for the first time, and God knows how long, if ever, an actual leftist has been elected to the presidency of the country of Colombia. And it's a very, very big deal. So we want to congratulate the people of Colombia and of Latin America on that victory. In France, there's been a parliamentary turn of events. Macron, the corporatist, did defeat the far-right fascist Marine Le Pen, but just in the last couple of days, there's been a major change in the parliament. And his corporatist party, Macron's corporatist party, is still the biggest party, but it no longer has a majority in the French parliament. And the second biggest party is now a leftist party, which is very significant in French politics. So we're going to see a change there, and it's a very, very significant change. I'm going to also, some bad news is that the government in Israel has fallen, and it was the first government in Israeli history that included Arabs, and it had an Arab contingent to it. And the fall of this coalition is not good news. It means there will be another election, and we could actually wind up again with Netanyahu running the country. You know, it's be like Nixon or Reagan returning to run the United States, or God forbid, Trump. So that's worth noting. Also, I want to note that the fascist dictator in Brazil, one of my least favorite persons on earth, Bolsonaro, is losing very deeply in the polls to the leftist Lula, who's a very good guy and who was removed illegally from office. And they do have elections scheduled upcoming. And Bolsonaro has announced very clearly, like Donald Trump, that he does not intend to leave office, and that he will not accept the results of an election that is won by Lula. And he apparently has at least some of the military behind him. So we need to keep an eye on that. Okay, now let's return to Australia. Dr. Orr, first of all, can you tell us the significance of this change of change of government in Australia. It's a very big deal, or we think it is. What do you think?
I think it's huge, and it's really good news for once. After a decade of living under a fairly right-wing, non-progressive government. So we have a two-party system like you do. We have our Republican equivalent, the coalition, and we have our Democrat equivalent, the Labour Party. And the Republican equivalents have been in power for almost a decade. And they've been really very patriarchal, absolutely against any form of action on climate change. We have been the prototypical nation of climate deniers, to the point where trying to introduce electric vehicles was described as a war on the weekend. We've had no effective environmental policy for a decade, and we've got the highest rate of species extinctions in the world. About 5 years ago, the election at that point, the Democrat equivalent party ran on a platform of reducing social inequality and action on climate change, and lost by a narrow margin, which was just absolutely heartbreaking. So it locked in another 5 years worth of right-wing government, no action on climate, more inequality and more patriarchal government. Anyway, over time, that government got into a lot of trouble because, we've had bushfires and floods and droughts and heat waves. And more Australians are waking up to the fact that we're really in desperate trouble environmentally. So there's been a lot of concern about climate change and the fact that we're doing nothing about it. Gender politics has become huge. A woman was raped in the Parliament a couple of years ago, and that's been a scandal that was completely mishandled by our government. And
Wait a minute, did I hear you right? Did you say a woman was raped in the Parliament?
Yes,
in the building?
Parliament building. Yes.
What?
Yes.
Okay, geez.
Yeah.
In the United States, there was a guy in the 1800s who was caned and badly beaten. But I don't think even in the American Parliament, in the American Congress, no one's ever been raped.
Yeah, well, we have that unfortunate distinction. So, and that was incredibly badly mishandled by the government in power. And also, when they got in last time, they promised to do an integrity commission looking at integrity in politics. And despite having been in power for 5 years, they completely failed to push that. And that created an awful lot of anger. So this time, the Democrats ran on a relatively small platform. They were trying to make themselves hard to hit. But there was a lot of anger against the Republican equivalents, the coalition. But the real big story of the election was the rise of independent candidates. So this is candidates not associated with either of the two main parties, but standing on a platform of action on climate change, on gender politics, and on integrity in our government. And there was a big campaign run by a group called Climate 200 that got money for these candidates, all standing independently. They're not a new political party, and they got about half their candidates into seats in Parliament. And what happened is that the Republican equivalent completely lost their base, which was mostly taken by these independent candidates, and that allowed our Democrat equivalent to just sneak into power. So it's really been a massive change in Australian politics, which has just been extremely conservative for very long, and absolutely heartbreaking for any of us that care about the environment. I'm quite hopeful for the future. I would have preferred if it was a hung parliament, because then I think the progressives would have had more influence. The trouble, of course, is that in a largely two-party government, vested business interests make it so that regardless of who's in power either way, their interests aren't really threatened. And we certainly see that with the fossil fuel industry here in Australia. But finally, we have real hope for change. Also, we don't have the same problems in terms of gun control or abortion that you guys have in the USA, but we certainly have problems with racism. And this new government, along with addressing integrity, gender politics and climate change, are also promising to address racism against Aboriginal Australians. So I'm actually quite hopeful for the next few years, honestly. It's good news.
Well, fantastic. We certainly need it. And congratulations. And I'm still reeling from the idea that a woman could actually be raped in the Parliament. But, you know, well, we certainly, God knows what the January 6th mob would have done had they gotten their hands on AOC, for example. So you never know. Steve Caruso, do you have your hand up again, Steve?
Yeah, somebody had a question in the chat. What do you think the outcome will be for Julian Assange?
Well, yes, Julian Assange, as you know, there has been a decision that allowing Julian Assange to be taken to the United States, but he is an Australian citizen. Is Australia going to intervene now on behalf of Julian Assange?
I confess that's not a drama I've been following real closely personally, because
Okay.
obviously Julian Assange has been in the UK for a long period of time. What I would say is that most of the politicians and public figures that I respect have said something to the effect that we should be supporting Julian Assange and bringing him back to Australia. So probably that's what we should be doing, but I confess I've not been following that one real closely myself.
Well, why don't you bring it up and see what we can do, because he needs to be saved. If he's brought back to the United States, he will die. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you know, so as an Australian, you have now been deputized to save Julian Assange, and our prayers are with you. Our thoughts and our
I'll put
prayers.
that on my to-do list.
Yes, please. George Ripley, and now I go to Ray McClendon and talk about indicting Trump. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, Carolyn, I was kind of astonished to hear that statistic that you've got 15 extinctions. You lead the world in extinctions in your continent there. That surprised me. It doesn't surprise me too much because the heat that's overcoming the state and the country. And I was wondering, since you play such a lead role in that global warming, fires everywhere, problems, serious problems, are you alert to the global movement for climate change and Greta Thunberg and all of that?
Yes, I'm very much part of that movement. As Doctors for the Environment and Extinction Rebellion, absolutely.
Good. Well, we had someone last week, and we may have him back on next week from Extinction Rebellion, thanks to Wendy Lederman. And so we're going to continue to make that connection. And, you know, God knows it's a global issue. So,
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Caroline.
I think if you look at species extinction and pollution and climate change, these are all three heads of the same problem. You know, by tackling one, we're going to tackle all of them. They're absolutely indistinguishably linked, and we either sort them out or they're going to end us as a species.
Absolutely. Well, we're number one on the extinction list more and more. Thank you, Carolyn. Now, you were also going to discuss with us the Australian response to the January 6th insanity. I want to go first, if you will, I want to go first to, we'll come back to you on that, okay? I want to go first to Ray McClendon in Georgia. I hope everyone has been watching the hearings. There will be another hearing tomorrow morning. They have been incredibly well produced. They seem to give evidence that the Democratic Party is actually capable of accomplishing something, which is truly an amazing moment in our history that we haven't encountered before. I read an interesting piece by Steve Rosenfeld, Ray, you're in Atlanta, that indicated that even, and we want to talk about the indictment of Trump and the global response on 1/6, but this piece indicated that Georgia could conceivably indict Trump. Is that true?
Yes, it is. And hello, everyone. Glad to be with you once again. The local Fulton County DA, Fonnie Willis, is under incredible pressure right now from a lot of MAGA forces that are attempting to intimidate. But she has impaneled a special grand jury. She has personally been involved in the selection of that grand jury. And when you look at the case, this is one of the strongest cases possible against Trump that you could have. It will be on full display tomorrow, which is basically Georgia Day at the 1/6 hearings, when you'll be hearing directly from some of the folks who were being threatened and intimidated to become a part of the seditious conspiracy surrounding Trump's fraudulent influence on the election. So So I think more information will come out tomorrow that will strengthen the potential for the case to move forward. She's already been doing, people have been testifying already before the grand jury. Several members of Raffensperger's staff have already been before the grand jury. So I expect even more fireworks to come out of tomorrow. She's going to be diligent and very focused about this, but there's a very strong likelihood that we're going to see some strong results, favorable results coming out of the local DA's office, which is it's great, but it's also unfortunate that we don't have more to show at the federal level, because this is a lot of pressure to put on a local DA that doesn't have the resources for this kind of sprawling investigation, and certainly doesn't have the security detail that she needs in order to be protected, given the extraordinary death threats, multiple death threats, I might add, that have popped up against her. You saw what happened to that Philadelphia commissioner, Republican commissioner, and the threats that went against his life. Fonnie Willis's are multiple times that. So we need to keep her in prayer and definitely focus the attention on how courageous she is in the middle of what is a very dangerous position to take going up against these MAGA folks.
Ray, is there an email or a website or somewhere that you could put in the chat that we can use to send her support?
That's a good question. I'll find something for you and get it to you. If not before the hour, I'll certainly get it to Mike and others so it can be published. But she needs support, definitely.
Well, of course, the question on all our minds is, does Georgia have a jumpsuit big enough in bright enough orange to fit Donald Trump?
I'm sure they'll find one if they were able to get him convicted here. And the good thing is it's a county operation, so they wouldn't be able to pull from the outskirts where there would be more sympathy. The demographics in Fulton County would certainly hold up that he would get a fair trial, but it wouldn't be the kind of trial he would get out in some of the outlying counties. So we're just hoping that indictments will come forward. The other thing I want to just say is we have runoff elections here from the May 24 primary. Tomorrow, we just finished up early voting. So we've been actively involved in that with all of the organizations that were part of the Georgia Way that many of you are familiar with. So we're now in the final days of that. And the main races are for runoffs for lieutenant governor, where we have a couple of, at least one progressive candidate, a couple of progressive candidates for Secretary of State, for Labor Commissioner and Insurance Commissioner. It's a very diverse group. So out of that group, we should have some strong candidates that'll go up against Republicans in the fall. The turnout is light, but the good news is we should come out of this with a good slate, one way or the other, and we'll be starting up for our voter registration, education, and mobilization going into the fall, just as soon as we see how the dust clears after tomorrow.
Well, just diverting a bit from January 6th, you have two major campaigns or elections in Georgia, actually three, that the whole world will be watching. The Senate race Herschel Walker is something else, man. And then, for governor and secretary of state, we have Stacey Abrams there. How are you interfacing with Stacey Abrams and that campaign? And Ralph and Senator Warnock.
And Warnock. Stacey has a very strong campaign. As you know, she has the Fair Fight Machine behind her, which is an organization that she started. And it's going to be a very close race. It's all about turning out the vote. Right now, the Republicans in the primary, and rightfully so, had more energy. So over the course of the summer, we've got to match that energy and mobilize more voters. So I think Stacey's up to the task. She has a strong ground game. What we're doing is working with Warnock to focus his ground game. We met. He was one of the major participants in our Atlanta NAACP Juneteenth parade that we had over the weekend. So we had an opportunity to visit with him on Saturday and talk about how we're going to get the vote out across the state. So we're looking forward to that, and we'll be, as much as we possibly can, be complementing each other's efforts going into the fall. But it's going to be an uphill struggle for a couple of reasons. Number one, Herschel Walker, although he's probably suffering from CTE, concussion syndrome, it doesn't matter because he's a legend in Georgia because of UGA, and he's going to get a substantial vote. So what we've got to do once again is turn out the progressive and democratic vote, which is winnable, but it's not going to be a walk in the park because right now those voters are not energized. So we've stressed to Warnock that it's about mobilizing voters, and especially voters of color. And we've got a strategy to target those voters over the course of the summer going into the fall. So with the top two races, it's going to be nip and tuck. It's all about energizing those voters right now, trying to get a messaging. And unfortunately, as you all know on this call, the Democratic Party is terrible at messaging. So what we're doing is going directly to the people and using our trusted messengers that we have to get the word out how important this election is, regardless of what the misinformation and disinformation campaigns are going on coming out of Washington.
Well, Ray, I hope you're going to come back next week. We want to talk about the interface between grassroots campaigning and these three really incredibly important races. So I hope you'll come back with us. And just the idea that the county DA would indict Trump is just beyond appealing. Whatever support she needs, I'm sure the people on this call, in a nonpartisan way, will send her. So let's talk about that again next week.
Sure.
Myla has a hand. Thank you. And then we want to go back to 1-6 because we're running out of time. We do have 80 people on the call. And at the top of the hour, we will be going into deep dive on the Pacifica Network. But Ray, it's great to see you back with us. We appreciate it. Myla Reeson?
Ray, it's always so wonderful to have you on these calls. I was just wondering about the impact of the recent scandals, the children that now this wonderful football player is acknowledging. Is that do you think that's going to be a factor in the race?
No, it's not. I mean, again, Trump has showed you that unfortunately character doesn't matter in MAGA land. So just the whole thing about the children that he did not claim is just one of a list of 15 things that this man has done, from playing Russian roulette to threatening his ex-wife, girlfriends, police having to be called and summoned for abuse, for lying about being valedictorian at UGA when he didn't even graduate from UGA. I mean, the list just goes on and on. In prior years, those would have been disqualifiers on the face. But we don't live in those times anymore, and the MAGA crowd is going to come out and they're going to vote for him. He is so strong in Georgia that the Trump endorsement is really secondary. It's really that he is a legend football player, and it doesn't matter what he did in the past from a MAGA perspective. So it has not moved the needle at all.
I thought I saw a poll yesterday that said that Herschel Walker was at 47%, and so was Reverend Warnock. Is that pretty much?
It has fluctuated around, him being up 1 point, 2 points to being even. But as we know, it's hard to get comfortable with polls. It's all about turnout. We've got to get turnout out. And that's the challenge for Democrats. Right now, they are not energized. And so we've got to come up with messaging over the summer that lets people know the critical reasons for getting out to vote and how important this election cycle is if we're going to save democracy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ray. And we're going to go deeper into this next week. We hope so, and maybe we can talk also about a Trump indictment. George Ripley, real quick, and then we want to go back to January 6th.
Yeah, Ray, thank you very much. Could you put your contact information in the chat? I'd like to reach out. But sure. Another thought that I had, a question I had was, what effect he may play well enough in Georgia to get the vote, but how will he play nationally? I mean, picture that man in a role of responsibility and dignity and governance. They talk about Joe Biden being losing it. It's not going to play well around the country, I don't think.
But it doesn't matter. I mean, you're being logical. It doesn't matter. You look at the guy that they just elected, the former Auburn football coach that they just elected in Alabama.
Tommy Tuberville.
Yeah, I mean, he knows nothing about politics.
He has he's got CTE and never played. So.
Right. So we've got to just face reality that the normal character issues, things that would have been disqualifiers in the past, just do not mean anything with the current state of the MAGA QAnon party. If you try to make it make sense in a traditional political way, you're wasting time. What we've got to understand is I'm not looking for any of them to be converted. All I'm trying to do is get those like-minded people. There are more of us than there are of them. The problem is they are not energized right now to get to the polls. But if these folks do get in, they will vote in line with the extreme MAGA party, and we will be in line for civil war by 2024.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ray and George. We're going to move on to CAROLYN ORR. CAROLYN, you were going to tell us about the Australian view of January 6th, and then we'll open it up to see if people want to comment on January 6th before we jump into Pacifica.
Oh, thank you. Honestly, we were just amazed to watch those incredible scenes. Seeing your president egging on armed protesters storming the Capitol, it's like something out of science fiction, honestly. And then seeing the Republican Party not condemn him, but support him and shield him from consequences. The USA is the most important democracy in the world, and it's really a terrible signal to go out to the rest of the world. And it's been heartbreaking to watch. Now watching the current trial that's going on, that's actually very hopeful. There's a lot of good things seem to be coming out of that. And I hope that Trump faces some consequences for what he's done. I mean, why won't this man go away? He should never become president. He was horrendous when he was in. He ended in a way that should have put him in jail. I mean, I'm a left winger, but right wingers in Australia also think this is not one end of the political spectrum here. We all think he's absolutely barking, and certainly not doing an awful lot for your international reputation. So you are the most important democracy in the world. Give this guy the consequences he deserves. And it's also been so frustrating to watch the progressive agenda of Joe Biden and the Democratic Party just get stymied again and again by folk like Joe Manchin and so on. So I guess those are the kind of things we're watching.
Okay, let's jump in now. We have a few minutes of roundtable. Thank you for that, Carolyn. Sometimes it takes somebody with an Australian accent to get our juices flowing. Ruth Strauss, do you want to chime in? Anybody else?
This is just something everybody has to be focused on, the fact that in every city, town, etc., there is going to be mischief about electors, people who are monitoring. You've all heard about the people showing up with guns to intimidate people, and electors that once were balanced in a particular town, now that being replaced by Republicans, etc. Everybody must consider being a poll watcher or somebody who watches the count at the end of the election. I put in the chat Scrutineer's website. They, if you go there, they have training sessions for what to do to prevent sabotage, how to sign up and get into these things. You can also contact your local party affiliation and have them help you do it. But we have to do it everywhere across the country. These people are going to unseat us if we don't. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to reiterate that there will be a hearing tomorrow morning, the 4th of the hearings. And, I could barely contain myself after the last one. I thought it was the most disturbing thing I had ever seen about American politics, and that says an awful lot. Wendy Lederman, did you want to jump in? Wendy Lederman?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna ask Carolyn real quick if that's okay. And that was such an amazing account. Like, I feel like she should be testifying at the hearings. And we just love hearing her speak. She's so like kind of calm and warm. It's great energy. I was just kind of curious, and not to throw any curveballs, but I was just kind of curious if you could just maybe, like, because we have so much trouble here with like access to the polls, and in Australia, is it like, do people really like honor the right to vote, or do you have as much trouble as we do where they're actually trying to like stifle the vote itself, if just in general?
All right, well, we have two big advantages. The first is that everyone has to vote by law in Australia. If you don't vote, you get fined, and you get fined pretty significant amounts. And the second is that we don't do gerrymandering here. So there's a lot of negative things about Australian politics and democracy, but those are two pretty good positives. So no, we don't have issues with access to the polls. Now, so saying, disadvantaged groups, Aboriginal Australians and the young, are relatively underrepresented. But because everyone's sort of mandated to go to the polls and at least put something on the paper, we're getting the vast majority of the population out. So those are pretty good things overall.
Yes, we had on the call a month or two ago, the co-author of a book about Australian democracy, pointing out that it is mandatory to vote in Australia, and recommending that we do that here. Based on their book, I'm all for it. Raquel Guerrero, did you want to speak? And then Hetty Tripp. Raquel, go ahead.
Yes, so if you're interested in being a poll watcher in Arizona, please reach out to me. I would be happy to get you some training. I don't know if we can provide you any support, but if it's within your capacity to help me recruit, If you have any good ideas for recruiting people or you would like to volunteer, we will need poll watchers in Arizona, because in 2020 it was very dangerous. It felt very dangerous. We did have people show up with guns to the polls. We did have people intimidate our communities at the polling locations, and we had the City of Phoenix park rangers in Arizona harassing us whenever we were doing our campaign launches. So I'm very excited to ask for help, because Arizona is going to be a target for continue to be a target for disinformation and fascists, unfortunately. So it's very simple. You just go to the polling location and you show people where to go vote and how to vote, and then that's it. You don't tell them who to vote for, and but just having somebody to guide you through that, especially if you don't know, if you're a first-time voter like we do, that's going to make a big difference in constituents' lives, and it's a direct way to fight fascism and to support civic engagement. Yes,
Thank you very much, Raquel. We appreciate
You're welcome.
that. If you'll put your contacts in the chat, and we'll
Will
talk
do.
more about this later. Hetty Tripp, Hetty in St. Cloud, Minnesota, are you with us?
Yes, a question for Carolyn. What is your opinion and observation on voter accessibility to the Indigenous folks in Australia?
Not quite as good as it is for the general population. So, I mean, and that's the answer for everything when it comes to the Indigenous population. Their health is worse, their schooling is worse, violence is more, jailing is more. I think if I have my statistics rightly, the average Aboriginal Australian dies something like 20 years younger than the rest of Australians. It's a massive gap. But because of the mandatory voting thing, fairly strenuous efforts are made to get everyone to the polls. Now, so saying, not everyone does, but the participation for those people is much higher because it's mandatory. So there's a real drive to get the polls out to the people for that reason. So we're relatively good on that, and we don't have voter intimidation. You know, there's no one standing with guns round our. In fact, I spent polling day handing out leaflets for the Green Party, and actually it was really friendly because you're standing there with, you know, the Republican equivalent, the Democrat equivalent, the hard right equivalent, and all of us had a good chat. It was actually really quite a positive session. You know, I mean, I'm sitting here talking to people that I'd normally never pass the time of day with in terms of their politics, and it's actually quite good because you realise that they might not think the same way as you do, but they're still human beings. So it's actually got a quite good atmosphere in the polls here. It's not been politicised or polarised anything like the extent that you're dealing with it. I watch just American politics, and it's really, you're really in a tough situation.
Yeah, well, it's refreshing to hear there's some part of the world that still vaguely civilized. Thank you, Carol. We're going to return next week, of course, to the 1-6 saga. We'll have Joel Siegel with us. We'll have had another hearing or two, and we certainly want to have Steve Rosenfeld on and to join with Ray McClendon to talk about the possibility of indicting Trump in Georgia. We're going to change now. We're at the top of the hour, as promised, and we're going to talk about the Pacifica Radio Network. Steve Caruso, did you have something you wanted to jump in with before we do this? And then if you could put up the map of the Pacifica affiliates, that would be great. Steve, there's somebody's got, Alan Minsky's got his BAI shirt. We've been joined by Alan Minsky. I believe we have Dennis Bernstein on the call as well, the great host of the Flashpoints show at KPFA. Steve Caruso, did you want to say something?
The Georgia race for Public Utilities Commission, remember there was some messing around. Daniel Blackman, I think his name was,
yes,
was off the ballot. Now, supposedly I've read news that didn't happen, supposedly, but now there's another Democrat running for office, and since they're messing around with the districts down there, they moved things around so that she's excluded, but she's going to court. So here you have Georgia is building 2 new plants down there, and they can't get a Democrat on the commission for some reason. Just saying.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, thank you for that. Okay, we're at the top of the hour at 6:05. We're going to take a deep dive in now on Pacifica. Steve, if you will keep the recording going, I know Mike is going to sign off at 6:30, 3:30 Pacific time, but I think we're going to want to continue to record on the Pacifica issue. I will very quickly note, the way in passing, we didn't have a big energy discussion today like we might have, but about half the nuclear plants in France are now shut, and it's a very big deal. We'll talk about that next week. We have 79 people on the call, and I am going to open up now. You're going to see a map here. These are the Pacifica Radio Network affiliates, and the Pacifica Network was born in the late 1940s. It has been a very peace and consensus-oriented network. There are 5 major stations in New York: WBAI in DC, WPFW in Houston, KPFT in LA, KPFK, and in Berkeley, KPFA. And this is what should be the most powerful leftist radio network, the only leftist radio network in America. And it has been for decades now notoriously difficult to deal with for a wide range of reasons. Most importantly, a set of bylaws that is basically unworkable. And in last year, on July 7th, there was a referendum to change the bylaws. That referendum passed 6,820 to 5,471. It's known as the New Day Pacifica bylaws, aimed at preserving the only leftist radio network we have in the country. And that decision has been sabotaged in many, many ways, which I will talk about in a couple of minutes, and then we'll be picked up with Jan Goodman, who was one of the major forces behind the New Day Pacifica referendum. But I first want to go to Alan Minsky. Alan was the so-called interim program director at KPFK for 7 years or so, and was a great program director. The programming at KPFK was spectacular, everything that a progressive radio network should be. And yet Alan received relentless pushback from God knows who. And, essentially Pacifica management became a form of unregulated insanity. And Alan thankfully went a step up to Progressive Democrats of America. But in the interim, he published a spectacular prognosis and proposal for what Pacifica could be in terms of an effective and important progressive national radio network. And this overview was actually essential in my decision to move to Los Angeles. I had a show on KPFK called Solartopia, California Solartopia, as Alan rightfully told me that putting California first is essential to anything you do in California. But he was as great a program director as you could ever want, and his vision of Pacifica still remains absolutely essential. We as a group that has started with election protection and has branched out into energy, everyone should know exactly how critical and effective national progressive radio network could be to the future of this country. And Alan is the one who had the vision. So Alan, if you could explain to us, please, what you saw for Pacifica and what you see now, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Alan Minsky.
Well, I think Pacifica's experience has been a bit of a paradox. It's an incredible network. I'm wearing a WBAI t-shirt. I thought for the occasion was appropriate. I love all 5 stations, and KPFA, where Dennis is the host, was the original independent public radio station in the country, first kind of community radio station that was developed with the model for fundraising listener-supported radio. And Then it spread to Los Angeles, to New York City. I've always argued that WBAI, because the Pacifica Radio Archives was housed at KPFK, just the incredible output from WBAI radio in the 1960s probably was about as great a decade as any radio station has ever had anywhere in the world. Its impact culturally and politically really cannot be overstated. And this was true of all the Pacifica radio stations throughout that era. The paradox of Pacifica in the 21st century was there was a rebellion against the way that the national board was directing the stations and the network at the end of the 90s, at the beginning of the century. And there sort of was a listener, the revolt of the listener sponsors that amounted to enough of a majority that they won, and they won in court with the specific complaint they made, which revolved around the defanging of local power versus national consolidated power. And what was then set up, the bylaws, probably over-inscribed defense mechanisms designed to prevent what had occurred before, which created a sort of institutional stagnation, especially around the incapacity to change programming, really. And you had a sort of an internalized defense of the status quo. And as stations declined, managers would come in and they'd want to change things, but the board was basically stacked with people there to defend existing programming. And you had just every manager flee, one after another, after another, after another. Some incredible talent would leave. And the document I actually wrote was written by I was an interim program director for 9 years. And what was really spectacular about my time there was a non-interim executive director of the entire network for only 18 months out of my 9 years. And of those 18 months, the majority of them were from Arlene Engelhardt, who was the executive director who asked me to write this sort of vision for Pacifica going forward, because we were working very well together. And by the way, Dennis, I told Arlene, why are you messing with the programming on KPFA? Don't do that. It's something you're not going to survive politically. And she persisted, and it destroyed her majority on the national board, and she was removed. And then it went back to just chaos after chaos after chaos with interim general managers, most of whom were nothing more than elected listener-sponsored board members with usually very little managerial experience, no sense of no accumulation of the skill set you need to run a sizable national organization. By the way, one thing that Harvey left out about this, I think there were, again, a lot of paradoxes about Pacifica. In the midst of all of this, the network has by far, by orders of magnitude, its most successful project ever, which is Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! I mean, at no point previous in the history of the network had. So, it wasn't like everything was all terrible, even throughout the worst of it when it came to the internal fightings at Pacifica. And the other thing that I'd really point to, I think actually the archives has had responsible stewardship, which of course I'm thrilled, because even while I was there, while I don't think the work that we did compares to the early decades of KPFA or WBAI, especially in terms of historical resonance, but we did incredible programming. Dennis does incredible work. Programmers, by the way, KPFA has really righted itself. The management there really just decided to, and I think the people in the local signal area really decided that the chaos at the national level between the competing factions was something that could be overcome by just lifting up of a focus on the local station. And big props to the capacity of KPFA in the Bay Area to right itself. WPFW, I think, has had solid management recently, and they've really sort of straightened out a lot. I know that there might be people on the call who, if they're in the Bay Area or Washington, maybe they have carping criticisms. Believe me, those two stations have done well in the midst of chaos of really sort of righting themselves and stabilizing themselves. And I actually give a lot of credit to the managers who had to fight through a lot of bullshit in order to achieve that. WBAI, KPFT, and now sadly KPFK as well are really still involved in some pretty steep downward cycles. But, and there was always a but, I hope If you had seen it written on the page, you'd still see that the rhetoric was pointing to one more but. Big props to, oh my word, I'm forgetting her name right at the moment, the PACIFICA affiliates program. Pacifica is not just those 5 stations. Pacifica is the basically the lead organizer of stations around the country that are independent community stations, some of them quite sizable. Some of them more successful than any of the Pacifica stations in Atlanta, in Tampa, in Portland, and all across the country. That is the Pacifica affiliate program. And it's about a network of, I think, 150 stations. Now, that's a little bit of an inflated number because there are these things called micro stations, but that's only about 50 to 75. So imagine 75 community radio stations loosely, and her name is Rutenberg, Ursula Rutenberg, who works out of the community station in Ames, Iowa, an exceptional station itself. And she's done a brilliant job. So there's incredible reasons to support Pacifica, especially above and beyond the internal dynamics of its boards and even the chaos that is harming the 3 stations that I mentioned so badly. And it's an incredible asset, especially when you look at so many of these stations around the country. And let's not forget, these micro stations can have very tiny signals. They can basically do, you know, I live in Highland Park, a segment of Los Angeles. You could probably cover Highland Park, right? This is a deeply, densely populated area. Most micro stations don't exist here because there weren't available signals. But there were a few. There's one out in Venice in Southern California. These were opened up during the Obama administration. People got the licenses. But what you get to do when you have a micro station is complete a full programming grid. You generate all this programming. And now in the era of the internet, you can distribute that everywhere. It's a great excuse to produce social, political, and culturally relevant product. So it's still a very vibrant thing. It is still very, very worth defending. Now, to the heroic work that Jan, Mila, and Harvey have been more involved in than I have, which is the effort to try to salvage Pacifica's democracy, its democratic structures, its listener support structures, and its bylaws. And I just want to end with this. The experience of Pacifica is an example in the fragility of democracy, which of course you're all here collected to address in terms of the United States of America. And it's something where I think Jan, Mila, and Harvey have really fought in a very brave and courageous way to try to keep this radio network going in the form in which it has no corporate sponsorship, and it is organized and supported by the listeners. I mean, there are debates around corporate sponsorship, and even as I articulate that, I actually happen to believe this has now gone so far that the budget is so low that there's ways to engage this through particular corporations, one that specifically say support social justice matters or something like that. But I mean, that's up to debate for the people like Jan, Mila, and Harvey who are directly involved in this now. But it's an incredible network. It's worth saving. And can I just throw out one thing before I go, 2 things before I go, Harvey, on slightly?
Of course, please.
Yeah, the discussion from Carolyn on Australia. The result in Colombia was spectacular for the history of that country yesterday. On October 2nd, I believe, and then on October 30th will be the 2 rounds of the Brazilian national election. If Lula wins, as he's favored to win over Bolsonaro, all of South America will be unified around the left. And all of us who are progressive leftists, we can't just say, yay, we won, and walk away from that. We have to bring all of our energies to support in solidarity the efforts of the people of South America to generate a prosperous society. Certainly the United States has played a big role in suppressing the opportunities and rights of the people of Latin America. And we just need solidarity. We need to follow and coordinate with the people of Latin America and support their efforts to bring economic and social justice, and particularly economic justice, to the region. Because there's just been if you look at the Gini coefficients in those countries, it's way out of whack. It's right where the United States is headed in terms of wealth inequality. And the people don't want that there. They want the same things we want here: prosperous middle-class society. And let's do everything we can to support that. And let's support Lula in defeating Bolsonaro and going forward with that. And then lastly, look, anybody interested in participating in PDA's efforts to hold Republicans' feet to the fire around the January 6th commission. We are having an organizing meeting this Thursday. It is particularly for people who live in Republican House districts or in states with Republican senators, because we're going to try to hold their feet to the fire through constituents asking for the meetings and demanding that they answer certain questions. So please email me at my email, which I'll put in the chat right now, if you're interested in participating in that project and live in either a Republican-held House district or a state with a Republican senator. Our projects work through constituent outreach. So if you live in a Democratic House district and you live in a state with 2 Democratic senators, this particular project isn't for you, but we're looking for people who live in Republican-held House districts and states with Republican senators. So please email me. We'll be meeting Wednesday to start the coordination of this. It is a top priority for us. Thank you for allowing me to do that. And back to Pacifica.
Well, Alan, thank you. It's impossible to overestimate Alan's positive impact at Pacifica. He's a tremendous program manager. As far as I'm concerned, he should be running the network, but that's a whole other story.
Thank you for the very kind words, but I should have done better. And
you were great. And thank you for putting my show on with Myla Reason as my co-host, the California Solartopia show. I miss it dearly. I would love to get it back on KPFK, but there's no station manager to go ask to put it back on. I mean, this is a problem. So the second phase of this, and Jan Goodman is with us. Thank you so much, Alan, again. And Alan, of course, is integral to these calls. We are co-hosted by the PDA. Mike Hirsch works with Progressive Democrats of America. It's a great operation. As you can see, my Bernie shirt here. We are one of a kind. So let's proceed to, there are 2 more pieces to this. I'm going to discuss the attempt to reform the Pacifica bylaws, which is a case study in election protection. And then we will turn it over to Jan Goodman, who will explain us our steps going forward. Janet, if you will now post how to get in touch with New Day Pacifica and where people can go to support our efforts as we move along. We have 76 people with us. We will blow through, obviously, our 6:30 landmark, and if we can keep recording Steve Caruso, that will be great. Mike, if you have to leave us. But at any rate, what has happened at Pacifica now, as Alan mentioned, we've got a set of bylaws that were established early in the century that are not responding properly to the changing needs of broadcast radio or of running a progressive organization. And as the 2010s proceeded, chaos began to ensue in much of the administration of the Pacifica Network, to the point that Jan Goodman and her husband, Jerry Mann Pearl, who are on the call, and Myla Reason and a number of other people put in a tremendous amount of energy, Nancy Naparko, who's with us, in writing a new set of bylaws that would be responsive to modern conditions, that would streamline the network and make it possible for us to move forward in the 2020s. And if anybody have been involved at all with Pacifica over the years, you know that it's highly contentious. There's a lot of personal attack, which we do not allow on these phone calls, which I consider to be detrimental. I know whenever I'm personally attacked, it's an acknowledgement that I've won the argument because there's no, I don't have to explain. So people run screaming from Pacifica. Many of the local station board and other meetings are dysfunctional dictatorships, absolutely mind-numbing and incredibly just dysfunctional. Is about even to the point where you could use the word Orwellian. They are just absolutely amazing. So Jan Goodman, Jerry Mann Pearl, Myla Reason, and others put forward an alternative set of bylaws designed to streamline the organization. And these bylaws were put to a vote that ended July 7th of last year. And it was a very contentious, difficult, open campaign. And the new bylaws won among the listenership and the membership. You have to be a member of Pacifica. It costs, I think, $25 a year. You join your local station. And I guarantee you, everybody on this call is in range of a local station. You should all know what your local Pacifica affiliate is and join up for $25. And then you are a voting member. You're a member. And you would have been, if you weren't already, you would have been available to vote in the last Pacifica election, the referendum on the bylaws, and you will be eligible to vote in the upcoming election, which we are demanding take place. So the vote on the New Day Pacifica bylaws was 6,820 yes and 5,471 no. So the yes to the change of the bylaws won by 55% to 45%. In other words, a typical American vote count. You know, actually a pretty strong one. It was not a, you know, what you would call a cliffhanger, but it was, you know, within range of an average American election. But the people who are currently in charge of the apparatus at Pacifica intervened. And they said that there was an election at WBAI of 131 alleged staff members, and there are issues involved with who was really a staff member. And the vote count came in at 99%. Now, those of against the referendum. Now, those of us who do election protection work are well aware that a 99% vote count, in other words, there were either 130 or 129 people allegedly voted no versus 1 or 2 voting yes. Now that is right, for many of us, we'll kindly call that a red flag. That is a classic CIA third world vote count. And from this emerged a roughly 75% vote margin, turning down the new bylaws among the staff. Now it gets a bit eye rolling here, but this was a bifurcated election, and the staffs at the various stations voted allegedly separately from the membership. The staff at KPFK, the staff at KPFA, which is in Berkeley, KPFK is in Los Angeles, and KPFT in Houston, all voted 55% or more in favor of the change of the bylaws. The staff at PFW in DC voted no on the bylaws, and then the staff at WBAI voted allegedly 130 to 1 or 129 to 2 against. And that one election was used to overturn the votes of 6,820 listeners who voted in favor of the bylaw change. Now, if this to me begins to sound like Ohio 2004 or Florida 2000, because the people in charge of Pacifica said that the 99% vote count at WBI overruled the 6,820 people who voted to change the bylaw. It's outrageous and unsupportable and unsustainable. And there came a moment, and this is critical, where the legal team of Pacifica, which is supported by the donations of the members of Pacifica, refused to arbitrate or mediate or negotiate. There was a moment when New Day Pacifica approached or was involved in discussions with the legal team at the Pacifica Network, and mediation or arbitration or some kind of discussion could have occurred, where the 6,820 people who voted for the bylaw change would have been represented in a discussion over what to do about the bylaws of Pacifica. And this is the critical moment in the current history of Pacifica, because the legal team for the entrenched Pacifica Network refused to negotiate. and then went to court using Pacifica members' money to sue New Day Pacifica. Now, there was a moment in the hearings on the Trump attempted coup that really resonated with me, where one of the lawyers for the Team Trump, one of the rhinos, the mainstream Republicans, was talking to John Eastman, the fascist lunatic who advised Trump to overturn the election. And this guy says to John Eastman, are you going to turn your back on 78 million American voters and tell them their votes did not count? That's what he said. That's a reasonably close paraphrase of what this Republican told John Eastman. And essentially, the same thing was told to the 6,820 Pacifica members who voted for the bylaws change. Not only were we told, and I was one of them, that our vote didn't count, but the legal team at Pacifica took our money, sued New Day Pacifica, legally threatened New Day Pacifica personally, Jan and Jerry and two others, using our money, and have refused to reveal, this is astounding, they have refused to reveal even to the local station boards how much money of our money they have spent to fight the New Day Pacifica bylaws, which were approved by 6,820 paying Pacifica members. As you can tell, this gets me a little peed. I mean, it's beyond me in many ways, because this is Pacifica. This is not PBS. This is not the United States of America. This is a network that was set up by nonviolent peace activists who believed in consensus decision-making. It's outrageous. So, and then it gets worse, because we then had local station board elections. And so we're sitting in a situation now where the legal team of the Pacifica Network is using membership money to sue members who won the election with this small, notwithstanding 99% vote count at WBAI involving 131 people. 6,820 people voted to change the bylaws. We're being sued both organizationally and personally using membership money, which they refuse to disclose how much. Wow. Then we have local station board elections, where the members of the local station board are voted in by secret ballot among the paying members. The paying members at KPFK in Los Angeles cast their ballots with a ballot that included 4 people who were in a reasonable and legitimate vote count actually elected. Will Ryan, who passed away, Robert Payne, Nancy Pearlman, and one of the
Adam Wall.
and Adam Wallman, who's on the call. So these 4 people were legitimately elected. After the vote count, after the votes were counted, in the middle of the vote count, the Pacifica legal team disqualified these 4 people and instead seated 4 other people on the board. Although Will sadly passed away, so it's actually 3. And we did have one candidate who was successful, but who dropped out because she was intimidated by the actions of the Pacifica legal team. So we are now in a situation, and this won't surprise you, we're coming up on new elections that are mandated by the old bylaws. The old bylaws call for periodic elections of local station board members. And the entrenched Pacifica minority, you will not be surprised, wants to call off the elections. Because guess what? There's not enough money at Pacifica to conduct elections. Now, the past year, if the station had been run, the network had been run decently in the past year, maybe they have a case to say, well, the old bylaws were good and but the situation in Pacifica is catastrophic. The finances are through the floor. The listenership is through the floor. I ask you, if you are running a nonprofit organization and you have an election and the majority, 55% of the voters say that they want to change the bylaws, and you tell them to drop dead, basically, do you expect your finances to prosper? Especially when you are personally suing 4 of the station's of the KPFK station's most important supporters over the past years. So, this is the situation at Pacifica. Adam Wallman's on the call. Jan Goodman, Nancy Naparko, Myla Reason, of course, Alan Minsky, other important principals at Pacifica. And we're not talking about, a neighborhood lemonade stand here. The Pacifica assets with the licenses are worth more than $100 million. This is the only institution on the left that has anything like the assets that we're discussing, primarily invested in the station licenses in New York, Texas, Berkeley, LA, and Washington. But there are other assets or buildings and so on. So you have a situation, there are political issues, there are corporate issues, there are asset issues, and what we're facing now at Pacifica is, in my mind, one of the most blatant abuses of democracy, having co-written 7 books on election theft, having personally watched what happened in Ohio 2004, I would have to say that this is as blatant and as irritating and as infuriating an abuse of the democratic process as I have ever seen. At an organization that was founded on nonviolent principles based on consensus democracy. And it is, as Alan has said, and Alan's overview of what could happen at Pacifica was sheer genius and really was a major motivating factor in my moving to Los Angeles and getting involved in this miasma, because I've been through this before with Liberation News Service in the 1960s. And this is, very, very parallel, very similar, and equally infuriating. Someday we can talk about what happened at Liberation News Service. It had a very happy ending, actually. And I'm hoping that Pacifica now will have a happy ending. So we have, over 220 affiliates. We have the ability to have a huge impact on American politics, like no other institution in this country. And yet it's being completely pillaged and de-democratized. So that's my wrap on Pacifica. Jan Goodman, who's in the middle of my screen, next to Myla Reason there, has laid out, their work has been unbelievable. I've never seen anybody work harder against more difficult odds. And I will say that the people who are in control of Pacifica have been incredibly abusive personally in the media and in various publications and in meetings, accusing people who are deeply dedicated to democracy and to Pacifica itself, of which are completely inexcusable as far as I'm concerned. So I want to turn it now. Many of you, I'm sure, are asking, what can I do? How can I help? And Jan Goodman, hopefully has posted in the chat. I can't deal with the chat when I'm doing this, how to get in touch. And Jan, if you will now tell us, please, what the future plans are for Pacifica, I would greatly appreciate it. Jan Goodman.
So first of all, I would like to find out how many people here actually have ever listened to a Pacifica, one of the 5 Pacifica stations. Can you raise your hand or put, like a thumb up or anything so that I can just kind of see? Okay. And I'm looking at, okay, like put your thumb up or a hand up or anything so I can see.
We have many different forms of thumbs.
Yeah, in any kind of form of a thumb or a hand or anything. Okay.
And
So
Jan, we have 20 minutes to get through this. So go
I know, but I always want to know who I'm talking to. So there's a lot of people here. There are some people here who, you know, are obviously familiar, and your hand up is good. You know, a number of people here. Thank you. Okay, now you can put your hands down and your thumbs and everything down. So there's a lot of people here who have listened to Pacifica, but there's actually quite a few more that have actually never listened to a Pacifica station. So I want to address myself, start addressing myself to the vast majority who haven't listened. And I want to say that as Sluggo has said, as Alan has said, that Pacifica is worth supporting, whether or not you know, are going to listen to it or ever will listen to it. And it's like supporting Planned Parenthood, you know.
Wait, sorry. Hold on.
And you're muted. There you go.
Okay, I went over the edge talking about Planned Parenthood, I guess.
Okay.
No. I hit that button. It's my fault. I hit it.
Okay, so I was saying the vast majority of you have never listened to one of the 5 Pacifica radio stations, but I want to say that supporting Pacifica and supporting New Day Pacifica is important, whether or not you can listen to the station. All of you can listen to it because you can go to, for instance, kpfk.org and listen online. You can listen online to any of them. But whether or not you do that, it's like supporting Planned Parenthood. Whether or not you're planning to utilize the services of Planned Parenthood or ACLU, it's important to support them because they represent some core values, and especially a left network, which a left radio network is especially important in this day and age, when the possibility of having, if Pacifica goes down, there is never going to be another chance at a left radio network. You know, we could say, unless some billionaire decides to support it. But in terms of people powered, in terms of nonprofit supported by members, it won't happen again. And it is literally on the edge of extinction right now. It is literally on the edge. So it is very important to support Pacifica and New Day Pacifica also. So I want to talk about how people here can support KPFK and Pacifica and WBAI, all of those stations. And I also, you know, the easiest way of supporting, of course, is by donating money. And donating money to Pacifica, you can go to one of the stations, and I've in the chat I've listed the names of the station. If you go to, for instance, KPFK and you put .org, it'll take you to the station, and you can then become a member of Pacifica, entitle yourself to vote in our elections, and you know, pick the one that appeals to you the most, either that you're in their area or that you would like to join. We particularly would like friends to join and participate in WBAI and WPFW, but pick the one that you like best. Urgently, we need support at New Day Pacifica, and you go to newdaypacifica.org if you want to find out more information. If you want to donate, we need donations to support the legal battle that we're in right now to save Pacifica, to save democracy at Pacifica. Now, there are some people here who may have some expertise or knowledge. You don't have to think of yourself as an expert in voter suppression and voter rights. And if there is anyone here who has any knowledge about, for instance, Harvey talked about a 99% vote in favor, 99 to 1% vote in an election that's supposed to be a free and open election is a sign that was not free, that there was manipulation or fraud or something askew if they're supposed to be open. If there's anybody here who has any expertise or knowledge in that area, statistically, or, anything in that regard, please get in touch with me personally, jangoodman.kpfk@gmail.com. That's jangoodman.kpfk@gmail.com. We're also looking for lawyers and legal workers to join the team. We may have to file another lawsuit to persuade Pacifica to follow its bylaws. Our legal team is, working very hard, and I will get to that in next about what is actually going on in the legal battle to get these bylaws put into place. So if you're a legal worker or a lawyer, you have any interest, you do not have to be an expert or even knowledgeable about election law or corporate law, although of course that would help. Please get in touch with me if you would like to help. Again, jangoodman.kpfk@gmail.com. And you can go to newdaypacifica.org to sign our petition, to get updates on what's going on, and to receive email updates. So that would be, helpful so that you can become familiar with this. So I think Harvey laid out the situation and the legal cases pretty well. I'll just tell you where we are in the legal battle right now is that we are at a point where we are trying to, Pacifica has gotten enough pressure to cut down their legal bills to so that we're at a stage where we're trying with Pacifica to come up with an agreed set of facts and an agreed set of issues that we want the court to decide, that perhaps the court can make some legal decisions without having a trial. And it is called a motion for summary judgment, or a joint motion, or a cross motion for summary judgment or summary adjudication of the issues. That is coming up fairly soon. And that's what we're working on right now. This issue about just not having elections is just, pretty outrageous. But as Harvey said, not that unexpected, because, and even just to give you a little bit more background about it, during the last delegate elections in which these 4 candidates were disqualified after the votes were counted, the New Day endorsed candidates at 3 of the stations, San Francisco, LA, and Texas, won strong majorities, like 9 out of 12 seats, in 8 or 9 out of 12 seats in all of those stations. And so it's not surprising that they don't want to have another set of elections, because then the present ruling clique will be out. And so that's why they don't want to have elections. And, and it's true, there's not a lot of money, and there's not a lot of money for many reasons, but one of the main ones is because they've spent so much money, like a fat cat lawyers, with just money to burn, and they've used members' monies that was donated to support programming and elections and democracy at Pacifica to try to squelch the results of the last election. So it's like the old story about the boy who kills his parents and then asks for mercy from the court because he's an orphan. There we are right now. We've used up all your money, no more for elections.
Right.
Now I'd like to ask Mila if she has any question, if she has anything to add, and then open it up to discussion.
Right, and if we have to, Steve, I'm sorry to impose, but if we can go to 7:10, that might cover us. We appreciate it. Jan, thank you for that. I can't begin to tell you all how hard Jan and Jerry and Myra have worked on this. It's just astounding, and others, Nancy and so on. Truly amazing how much time they've put in and effort. Myra, can you continue with this?
Sure, and thank you so much to Alan and Jan and Sluggo and an amazing presentation. I just want to impress on everyone that Pacifica is worth it. Even though the struggle is not always fun, it's worth saving. It's worth having Pacifica thrive because the potential is so great to reach millions and millions of people and impart information about election integrity and to stop fascism in this country and all of the wonderful issues that we care so deeply about. So I want to encourage everyone here to get involved at whatever level you feel comfortable, and then maybe even a little bit more. At the very least, please become members of one of the 5 Pacifica major stations so that you're eligible at the very least to vote in the delegate elections that we are supposed to have. According to our bylaws, we're supposed to have delegate elections this year, and the people who are desperate to hold on to power and afraid that they will lose power if those elections go forward are all of a sudden becoming very fiscally responsible after throwing thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars away to fight against implementation of bylaws that a majority of listener members voted for. All of a sudden, they're fiscally responsible and saying, oh, we don't have the money, we don't have the money, elections are too expensive. It's just their excuse. They'll come up with any excuse they can. And so I'm just hoping that people will understand that this is worth getting involved. At the very least, become a member, perhaps even consider running to become part of a local local station board if you live in one of the 5 listening areas, which are Houston, Los Angeles, the San Francisco Bay Area, Washington, D.C., or New York. And yeah, I want to hear from people and open it up for discussion, absolutely. And thanks to all of the wonderful presenters so far. This has been an amazing discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike and Steve, for sticking with us. We will go to Tim Past. George Ripley, please, George.
What, can I just?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Jan.
I just want to say that if there's anyone here who lives in a station board area, I would really encourage you to become a member of the local station board. And if you are at all thinking that that might be the case, or if you listen, if you're in one of the station board areas and just want to know a little bit more, please contact us, either Harvey, Mila, or myself, so that we can help you. We can talk about the stations. We can help you run and to get in and to get involved and to give you more information. Now, George.
Yeah, and Mike Hurst is working with us for a better Pacifica there in Washington, D.C. And
Yes.
George, I know you're in Washington, D.C. You look like a really likely PFW board member. So why don't you chime
I'm
in
friends
here?
with one. Ralph Nader wrote a book a while ago that he says is the best book he's ever written. It was called, it was a novel, and it was called Only the Super Rich Can Save Us. And I only throw that out there. It was a wonderful book, actually. And I throw that out there because, you know, the super rich, you mentioned it yourself, Jan, that maybe there's a billionaire waiting in the wings to save it, but Nader might be a good place to start looking.
Well, why don't you
It
guys
has a
get
program
together
on
with Mike?
KPFK.
Sorry, go ahead, Joanne. Yeah, George, why don't you get together with Mike Hurst and go see Ralph and see what we can do about PFW in DC? That would be great.
Okay.
Wendy in Florida. Wendy?
Thank you. Just want to say thank you so much to Jan and Mila. I mean, it's really heroic that, like, honestly, what you're doing. I mean, true heroism. I put in the chat, I know JFK had a quote where he was saying that there's a reason that the press is the only business that's protected by the Constitution, because without scrutiny and questioning our government, the Democratic Republic cannot thrive without that scrutiny. So it's so incredibly important what you're doing. I was hoping maybe you guys could, if someone could put a link in the chat for where we could sign up for those updates. And so even if we can't become a member now, we could at least stay in the loop and share the info with our networks. And I just wanted to also kind of mention, as I've done self-represented litigant as a pro se, and so I have a little bit of legal background. And I know with the summary judgment, that just requires that you have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that you basically wouldn't be wasting the court's time with a hearing, you know, because you have so much evidence. And I'm just thinking if you're able to get like a live stream of the hearing, because that's one thing with the judges too in the courts, is that it could, honestly, there's so much corruption in the courtroom. There really is. And if there's a way to maybe have that hearing public, might help your case a little bit. And then just one other thing, because I've been like from Orbit following this for, I remember you were on the show, Jan, last year, and I was really intrigued, and we appreciate having you. Just something I think about too is that, you know, I think, you know, there's so many different stations, and I don't think people realize that all of these little small independent, highly important progressive stations are all part of one bigger body. And so to maybe make that more of a clear image and just kind of like, even if it's like billboards or newspaper, like I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, you know, but just, you know, we have CNN, we have, because people like look at the big entities as more valid for some reason, and as just like to really paint the picture of how massive your organization is and just how important it is. Because like JFK said, like, we need you guys, and we just love you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, there's the map. Thank you.
And
Steve, right
Wendy,
on.
where are you from?
Sorry?
Thank you. I'm in Miami right now. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, which is about a half an hour north of here, but I'm in Miami right now. So I would definitely love to stay connected and help support your mission as much as I can. Thank you.
Well, we have some New Yorkers on the line. We've got Eric Lazarus, Dave Saltman, Lehman, all in the New York area. You guys all look like you'd be great board members at WBAI. So does anyone else want to jump in here, please, on Pacifica? This is a beyond critical. Nancy Naparko, you're raising your hand, Nancy? Got to unmute here. Hold on. Go try
Thank
now.
you. Yeah. Can one of you better speak to the $1 million a year Pacifica lost for a few years because they were so incompetent with keeping up audits?
Sure. So, you know, among the many problems that many board members have had in the past is that there are a group of board members who are more interested in having their own voice heard and their buddies' voices heard than raising money and taking care of business. And so for a number of years, Pacifica didn't do its audits, and we used to get $1 million a year in money from the
Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
CPB, Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And they finally said, you know, you are not doing your part. You don't even have audits, and we're cutting you off. And that $1 million a year was literally the deficit that Pacifica had for quite a few years. Now our deficit is even larger, but that $1 million a year made up a very important part of Pacifica's budget. And so now we're not only not government sponsored, not corporate sponsored, we're not government sponsored either. And we would very much like to get that back, and we're trying to get the money back, but haven't yet. So just to orally say, the link to the New Day Pacifica website is newdaypacifica.org. Super simple. newdaypacifica.org. Tatanka, you have your hand up.
Tatanka, go for it.
But
we're
thank
into
you.
overtime now. We do have to end at 7:10. We're at 7:01. So go for it, Tatanka, please.
For the people who don't know, I was actually surprised that the majority didn't know. I just want to reassure you, everything the speakers have been saying, I cannot imagine my life, and I've thought about this often, without KPFA. I cannot imagine the consciousness, the steps I've taken in life. There's only a short time when I was part of a Native mystery school up in North Idaho for 7 years, where I was out of range. And it was just after the revolt, anyways, is in the later 90s. And when Pacifica had to start relying, when KPFA and people had to start relying on the internet, and then, you know, it eventually resulted in things like Amy Goodman. But I mean, this is the only place, you know, you could hear when Watergate was going on, they cover it live. When Iran-Contra is going on, when January 6th is going on, I've been in my car and I can't watch it during the day, but I just turn it on my Pacifica station and I can hear the hearings live. Amazing music, just amazing programming. So, and like, you know, like after all these years, you say, why can't we normalize relationship with Cuba from way back when? And when you realize that in the present political climate and the control of corporatocracy, they don't want any example of an alternative model of anything that's successful. It's the same reason Pacifica has an impact far beyond its numbers. And for years, a lot of people would get their start there and move on to, you know, these would be the people populating some of them, some of the major news outlets with the consciousness of Pacifica. But it's because it's the only station that relies pretty much completely on members. NPR relies on corporations. You have conversations, books, things on Pacifica you cannot get anywhere else on radio in the world.
Yes.
It's that. And the last thing is those archives. I mean, if you could never get to the bottom of it, the treasure of those archives, our history as progressives is captured in those archives. Just mention some important figure since 1949 and it's there. Right. So get involved.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tatanka. I do want to quickly mention Bob Fass. Bob Fass was the guy who first put me on the air at WBAI in the 1960s, for God's sakes. He just recently passed away. No one else would have covered. We built the no nukes movement through Pacifica. Never would have happened otherwise. Okay, we're at 7:04. 7:10 is our drop dead date. Stephen Kaiser, very quickly. Mark Stansberry, and then
Can we
Dorothy
limit
Wright.
everybody's comments to like 1 minute right now?
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Stephen.
Can you tell me in just a few sentences how New Day Pacifica actually improves the chaos at Pacifica? I read through the material. I've listened to everybody on all sides, and I'm still just not clear on how New Day Pacifica actually improves things at Pacifica.
Well, okay.
Oh, let me address that really quickly.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so what the improvements are this. One is that we now have 122 people in governance at Pacifica. That includes 24 people at 5 station boards who all are given, according to the bylaws, a certain amount of responsibility in governance, personnel, finance, and those people and those issues are also taken up on the national board and also given to the executive director. So there is a lot of cross authorities, crisscrossing authority.
And
so
it doesn't work. It's just
so what the New Day bylaws do is they make it more efficient but equally democratic, because the local station boards are not involved in governing the station anymore. They're involved in helping the local stations, and then people directly elect national board members, and the national board is reduced in size from 24 to 15, which everybody who knows anything about boards says is a much better size. We wanted to make it actually smaller, but we couldn't figure out how to do it and to still include everybody in it. So it's more direct elections and less people involved in making the critical decisions, but the local station boards still have a lot to do with promoting the stations and doing outreach and so forth. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
let's
Good question, Stephen.
make it clear that Pacifica is pure in what it is, because it's listener supported and listener controlled, and yet and 55% of the listeners decided that the New Day bylaws were superior. That decision has been made by the people who distinguish Pacifica from the rest of the networks in the country. Mark Stansberry and then Dorothy Reich. We have 3 minutes. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Harvey. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Pacifica and that whole network that you've been speaking about is so critical to progressive agenda. And so we can't play around with this. I mean, we can't play around with this. This is a critical infrastructure for the left radio. I mean, we have WGRN, WCRS locally that, we play off of the big dogs, but we're a little puppy, but we take care of our own, but we have sustainability. I love the fact that we're able to hear progressive voice. So.
Okay. And I got to remind you that Mark is in Columbus, Ohio, speaks directly from the heartland, and is an important figure in the progressive community there. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for being with us. Dorothy Reich.
So I just wanted to, I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for KPFK. I was noodling around the radio and I found Democracy Now! But even more than that, I was listening to Jerry Quickly, and I've been trying to find Progressive Democrats of America because I had heard about them, and all of a sudden there was Marcy Winograd.
Yay, Marcy.
And I said, well, should I or shouldn't I? But I dialed 411. I found Marcy Winograd like less than 10 miles from my house, and got involved with PDLA and got involved with PDA. And I would not be here today if it wasn't for KPFK. And I would bet there are a lot of people on this call who would not be here today if it wasn't for
You're an
Pacifica.
incredibly important piece of the progressive community in Los Angeles. You got time for one more? The great Mansour, who has been a stalwart at KPFK beyond all reason. Go ahead, Mansour, and then we'll come back to Pacifica next week. We'll have a little more discussion. People can follow up, please. Okay.
After Mansour, I have one small important comment.
Okay, go ahead, Mansour.
You go ahead, John. John, go ahead.
Oh, it's
Thank you.
just,
Well,
if you
Mansour,
become a member of an affiliate, you are not a member of KPFK. You're only a member of, of Pacifica. You're only a member of Pacifica if you join one of the 5 sister stations: KPFA, KPFT, KPFK,
It's okay.
WBAI, and WPFW. Thanks. That's
Thank
all.
you. Okay, 30
Mansour.
seconds. 30
go
seconds.
for it, Mansour. 30
Thank
seconds.
you. Thank you. The only solutions that we could have, there are plenty of
Speak up.
progressive managers that we need to let the progressive managers and executive director to direct this foundation. Otherwise, a super majority of everybody who's on the local and national boards, they're not radio people, they don't know productions, they don't know media, they don't know the landscape. However, they make decisions on about a $12 million operation. Professional people we need to have. Thank you.
Yes, we need, a professional progressive is not a contradiction in terms. And these are the people we need. If you know people who are skilled and managerial or radio broadcasting, we desperately need you. We'll continue this next week. Thank you so much, Mansour, for all the great work you've done at Pacifica. And I'm glad your health has been somewhat at least restored. Thank you, Mike and Steve, for sticking with us. It's 7-11. It's been an amazing session. I'm thrilled that we were able to have this with Pacifica. We will return also to 1-6 next week and to Georgia. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.